Effectiveness of Alcoholics Anonymous, Wikipedia audio. The effectiveness of Alcoholics Anonymous in treating alcoholism is a subject of ongoing interdisciplinary research and debate in a multitude of academic and non-academic contexts. The Surgeon General of the United States 2016 report on alcohol, drugs, and health states well-supported scientific evidence demonstrates the effectiveness of 12-step mutual aid groups focused on alcohol and 12-step facilitation interventions. There are two principal ways to measure the effectiveness of Alcoholics Anonymous. Clinical studies. While newer studies have suggested an association between AA attendance and increased abstinence or other positive outcomes, older studies and studies done outside of the United States have not. Experimental studies into the effectiveness of Alcoholics Anonymous have been based either on results obtained from individuals attending meetings run under the umbrella of the AA organization itself, or from similar 12-step recovery programs based on the 12-step approach run externally from the AA organization, generically termed, in this latter case, as 12-step facilitation. A randomized controlled trial such as Dittman 1967 or Brandsma 1980. These trials tend to not show any difference in effectiveness between Alcoholics Anonymous, other treatments, and the control group. Leanne Cascudas argues these cannot accurately measure AA effectiveness because it's not possible to stop subjects in the control group from attending AA meetings, nor compel people assigned to AA to actively participate in the program. A number of longitudinal studies on AA's effectiveness have been done. These studies tend to show that the more involved subjects are with AA, the more likely the subjects will stay sober. Longitudinal studies suffer from self-selection bias, but one 2014 study claims that AA's effectiveness shown in these studies does not come from self-selection. Studies of both implementations of the therapeutic model have not yielded conclusive evidence of effectiveness when assessed in terms of long-term prevention of problem drinking as compared with other treatments, although limitations have been noted in obtaining acceptable data due to the difficulty in applying experimental controls to clinical analyses of AA, such as adequate placebo control and uniformity of the delivered therapy. Based on an overview of scientific studies available in 2014, John Kelly and Jean Barrison conclude, the evidence is overwhelming that AA, and treatments that facilitate patients' engagement with groups like AA, are among the most effective and best studied treatments for helping change addictive behavior. The 2006 Cochrane Systematic Review reviewed studies published between 1966 and 2005 that investigated the efficacy of AA and 12-step facilitation found no significant difference between the results of AA and 12-step participation compared to other treatments, stating that experimental studies have on the whole failed to demonstrate their effectiveness in reducing alcohol dependence or drinking problems when compared to other interventions. This conclusion was based on a meta-analysis of the results of 8 trials involving a total of 3,417 individuals. The authors note that further efficacy studies are needed, and mention the presence of flaws in one included study regarding the definition of success of interventions. The review only looked at experimental studies. In the case of this Cochrane review, that meant that the only studies they considered were randomized controlled trials. Observational studies, including longitudinal studies, were not utilized. Cascudas, in a 2008 letter criticizing the Cochrane Review, said, among other things, that non-experimental research should have been considered. The authors of the Cochrane Review responded to this statement. Brown 2002, Cloud 2004, Davis 2002, Collar 2004, Match 1998, McCready 1996, Walsh 1991, Zenmar 2004. The review used the following studies. John Kelly, who is working on the updated version of the Cochrane Review concerning Alcoholics Anonymous, says that there are positive results in favor of 12-step facilitation treatments that have emerged from the numerous NIH-sponsored randomized clinical trials completed since the original review published in 2006. Cochrane Review 2006. A very small preliminary study published in 2016 shows that prayer helps people who have achieved sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous reduce cravings for alcohol. The study used a MRI machine to scan how subjects reacted to images of people drinking. The study randomly assigned the subjects, so that some subjects saw the images after saying prayers in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, others after reading newspaper articles. The people who had just seen the prayers reported feeling fewer cravings for alcohol. The MRI scans of their brains confirmed that there was a different reaction. A 2014 study by Keith Humphreys, Janet Blodgett, and Todd Wagner concluded that increasing AA attendance leads to short and long-term decreases in alcohol consumption that cannot be attributed to self-selection. Austin Frocht, writing for the New York Times, discusses how the study's methodology minimizes outside factors, such as how motivated the people who succeed at becoming abstinent are. In 2009, Lee Ann Cascudas performed a meta-analysis of other studies looking at how effective Alcoholics Anonymous is. The article notes that rates of abstinence are about twice as high among those who attend AA, but that whether Alcoholics Anonymous has a specific effect is unclear, stating that there were 2 trials finding a positive effect for AA, 1 trial finding a negative effect for AA, and 1 trial finding a null effect. The study reported that while the evidence base for 12-step groups from experimental studies was weak, other categories of evidence are overwhelmingly convincing. Specifically, the correlation between exposure to AA and outcome, the dose-response relationship, and the consistency of the association were found to be very strong. In other words, the frequency by which individuals attend meetings appears to have a statistically significant correlation with maintaining abstinence. Cascudas noted 2 studies which both found that 70% of those who attended 12-step groups at least weekly were abstaining from alcohol consumption at follow-ups 2 and 16 years later. Those who attended less than once per week showed about the same success rate as those who didn't attend meetings. Cascudas also found AA to function consistently with known behavioral change theories and substantial empirical support for specific mechanisms through which AA facilitates change. A 2006 study by Rudolph H. Moose and Bernice S. Moose looked at the outcome of a group of alcoholics seeking treatment over a 16-year period. The study stated that individuals who participated in AA for 27 weeks or more had better 16-year outcomes, showing that only 34% of individuals who did not participate in AA in the first year were abstinent at 16 years, compared to 67% of individuals who participated in AA for 27 weeks or more. A review of the existing body of experimental evidence on AA, carried out by Kaunacki and Shadish in the late 1990s, showed that randomized controlled trials showed a negative effect for AA, suggesting that coercion to AA yields worse outcomes than the outcomes of people who received other types of addiction treatment and those who received no treatment. However, other trials showed that AA had a positive effect. In 1991, Walsh and a number of other researchers carried out a randomized controlled trial among 227 subjects. They were randomly assigned to mandated inpatient treatment, mandatory AA meetings, or allowing the subject a choice of options. Gallanter et al. 2016. Humphreys, Blodgett, and Wagner 2014. This study was one of the 8 studies used to determine the conclusions for Cochrane 2006. Cascutis 2009. Moose and Moose 2006. Kaunaki and Shadish 1999. Walsh 1991. Brandsma 1980. While the subjects assigned to inpatient treatment did better than the subjects only assigned to AA meetings, the inpatient treatment consisted of 3 AA meetings a week while in treatment, followed by a year of 3 AA meetings a week after the inpatient treatment ended. The study shows that inpatient treatment consisting of AA is more effective than just AA meetings. In 1980, the book Outpatient Treatment of Alcoholism was published. It describes a study of 260 individuals, 184 referred by the courts and 76 self-referred or referred by other agencies for 210 days. Participants were assigned randomly within 5 groups: AA-like meetings run by experienced non-professionals, RBT therapy administered by a non-professional, RBT therapy administered by degreed professionals, insight therapy administered by professionals, and a control group receiving no treatment. While some people who went to the AA-like meetings indulged in binge drinking at the 3-month after treatment mark, there was no increase in binge drinking for the AA-style meeting members 1 year after treatment. According to the study, both the AA-style and the lay RBT group were able to stop drinking more often than the control group after 1 or 2 initial drinks, and when drinking they both consumed 3 to 4 times less alcohol per day than the control group. This study had poor methodology. There was no effort to stop the people in the control group from attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and the Alcoholics Anonymous treatment patients underwent in the Brandsma study did not use actual Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. The control condition allowed for participation in actual AA meetings, while those in the AA condition attended a weekly AA-like meeting administered by the study. Dittman, et al. 1967. A 1967 study where a judge randomly assigned offenders to either clinical treatment, AA treatment, or to a no-treatment group. After 1 year 68% in the clinic group were rearrested, 69% in the AA group were rearrested, and 56% were rearrested in the group receiving no treatment. No statistically significant differences between the 3 groups were discovered in recidivism rate, in the number of subsequent rearrests or in time elapsed prior to rearrest. Like the Brandsma study, the results are inaccurate since the studies did not stop people not assigned to AA treatment from going to AA meetings. In 1992, the United States Census Bureau and the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism conducted the National Longitudinal Alcohol Epidemiologic Survey. Direct face-to-face interviews were conducted with one randomly selected respondent, 18 years of age or older, in each of 42,862 households within the contiguous United States and the District of Columbia. NLA's respondents were asked whether they ever attended an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting for any reason related to their drinking. 1,106 respondents stated they had attended an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting for their drinking prior to the past year. 348 respondents stated they attended an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting prior to the past year and continued to attend Alcoholics Anonymous during the past year, a 31% continuance rate. In 2001 to 2002, the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism conducted the National Epidemiological Survey on Alcoholism and Related Conditions. Similarly structured to the NLAs, the survey conducted in-person interviews with 43,093 individuals. This time, respondents were asked if they had ever attended a 12-step meeting for an alcohol problem in their lifetime. 1,441 of respondents answered the question affirmatively. Answers were further broken down into 3 categories: disengaged, those who started attending at some point in the past but had ceased attending at some point in the past year; continued engagement, those who started attending at some point in the past and continued to attend during the past year; and newcomers, those who started attending during the past year. In their discussion of the findings, Koskayudas et al. State that to study disengagement, only the disengaged and continued engagement should be utilized. To measure the retention of members, the 1968 AA General Service Conference voted to begin surveying those participating in AA. A survey was conducted beginning that year and subsequent surveys have been conducted about every 3 years, the latest of which was conducted in 2011 and published in 2012. The basic results of the surveys are made available in pamphlet form to AA members. Additional comments and analysis intended for academic and professional audiences were written to supplement the survey results from 1970 to 1990. Non-Alcoholic Board of Trustees member, Dr. John Norris wrote the second and third analyses. The second was presented at the North American Congress on Alcohol and Drug Problems. The third was presented at the International Congress on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. The 1990 commentary evaluated data of triennial surveys from 1977 through 1989 and found that after the first year, the rate of attrition slows. Only those in the first year were recorded by month. The survey states that the data strongly suggests that about half those who come to AA are gone within 3 months. Comments published by AA about this survey claim that 26% of people who attend AA meetings continue attending for more than 1 year. This is very close to the results from several independent assessments. In the previous surveys, this group would be the only ones considered to have tried AA. After the first year, the rate of attrition slows. The nature of the survey questions asked did not allow a direct comparison between the 12th month of the first year and the first month of the second year. Only those in the first year were recorded by month. The necessity of an introductory period was not considered in the 1990 analysis, and the concept was not present in its analysis. According to AA World Services, about 40% of all AA members who have already been sober for less than a year will remain both sober and active in AA another year. 60% of this group will either lose sobriety or stop participating in AA during the next year, or both. About 80% of those participants who have been sober between 1 and 5 years will remain both sober and active in the fellowship another year. About 90% of the members who have been sober 5 years or more will remain both sober and active in the fellowship another year. These figures have been repeated within a few percentage points using the same calculations since 1974. While AA World Services has continued to publish member surveys, they have not published any parallel commentary or analysis of the surveys since 1990. However, In 2015, AA Great Britain published a membership survey document commenting on 9 surveys that they have done since 1972. These surveys found that 70% of members said they had over 1 year's sobriety, 64% said they had over 2 years sobriety, and 22% of members said they had been sober for less than 6 months. In the foreword to the second edition of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way, 25% sobered up after some relapses, and among the remainder, those who stayed on with AA showed improvement. These numbers are in line with observational studies. Moose and Moose 2006, for example, found that, 16 years later, 67% of the people who chose to regularly go to meetings were still sober. Membership retention. In the main text it says, "Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path," implying that the long-term sobriety rate among those who completed all 12 steps of the recovery program and continued daily work on their recovery, as specified in steps 10, 11, and 12, is very high. This claim has never been scientifically tested. However, Gabriel Siegel reports that he has done extensive, though informal, and unscientific, research into the question. He surveyed 15,000 subjects, mainly on the Internet, in Facebook and Google groups, asking, "Have you done the 12 steps thoroughly and then relapsed while still doing them thoroughly? Or do you know of anyone meeting those conditions?" His sample included many who had been dissatisfied with 12-step fellowships and left them. If someone said that they had relapsed under the conditions, he discussed with them what they had been doing in relation to each step. He found only 2 subjects who, after discussion, continued to maintain that they had relapsed while thoroughly following the program. Siegel concluded, "I believe that these informal studies provide good anecdotal evidence that 12-step programs are 99 to 100% effective, if followed thoroughly." This might seem incredible. But skepticism may be alleviated if one thinks of the program as analogous to diet and exercise. A strict regime of diet and exercise is more or less guaranteed to control weight. However, such regimes only work for people who follow them, and this is not easy to do. People who try to follow the regime and do not keep their weight down fail, not because the regime doesn't work but because they are not following it. Dodds, in The Sober Truth, argues that most people who have experienced AA have not achieved long-term sobriety, making the controversial argument that research indicates that only 5 to 8% of the people who go to one or more AA meetings achieve sobriety for longer than 1 year. Gabrielle Glazer used Dodds' figures to argue that AA has a low success rate in a 2015 article for The Atlantic. Results from National Longitudinal Alcohol Epidemiological Survey. The 5 to 8% figure put forward by Dodds is controversial. Thomas Beresford, MD, writing for the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, says that the book uses 3 separate, questionable, calculations that arrive at the 5 to 8% figure. This is not the only criticism the book has received. The New York Times calls The Sober Truth a polemical and deeply flawed book, and John Kelly and Jean Barrison state that the book's conclusion that approaches are almost completely ineffective and even harmful in treating substance use disorders is wrong, noting that studies published in prestigious peer-reviewed scientific journals have found that 12-step treatments that facilitate engagement with AA post-discharge produce about 1/3 higher continuous abstinence rates. Results from NIAA's National Epidemiological Survey on Alcoholism and Related Conditions. Results from triennial surveys. Anecdotal evidence. The sober truth.